watching you tonight, Minister, and they may believe you are well-intentioned, but every step along the way, your banking policy has been wrong, and the figures have been wrong.
No, I don't accept that.
And let me finish for one moment.
No, I'm sorry, I don't accept that at all. I mean, you've put it to me very plainly that the banking policy was wrong, and I want to deal with that. The classic textbook example of how to deal with a banking crisis is the Swedish example. They started with a guarantee, they set up an asset management company, and they nationalised the bulk of the banking system. That's exactly what we've done in Ireland. We've guaranteed the banks, we set up an asset management company, and we nationalised the banking system.
But they had banks.
No,
I'll
tell you what they had.
Casinos,
they
which
had,
our government allowed.
No, they had banks that were run as casinos and developed huge property exposures, but they had one difference from us. They had all-party agreement. They didn't have nonsensical arguments in the public press or the media about what they were doing. They knew what to do, and they did it.
Okay.
We've done it in this country against the context and background of a great deal of irrelevant noise, and we're getting on with it.
But Minister, it's not irrelevant noise with respect. I hear what you're saying. You're saying this is what we need to do now to survive as a country.
Yes.
But you must explain to people why, for instance, the regulator, who didn't regulate the banks, is now off with his big pension pot, probably sunning himself somewhere. We also have the guys who were running the central bank who were not doing their job properly. And we have the bankers and the developers who are hanging beside their pools in the Algarve. They are not paying anything. And the Irish taxpayer is.
What I've had to do is appoint a new regulator, appoint a new governor of the central bank, change the boards of the different institutions, and make these institutions dynamic institutions that can serve the Irish people and their economy. If persons committed criminal offences in the past or owe money, there are legal procedures there to collect that money, to prosecute them for those offences. And that's what those procedures are there for. That's the system we operate in this country, a legal system based on the rule of law, and that rule of law must be applied to everyone who transgressed the law. And if bankers broke the law, they must go to jail. Nobody's arguing about that.
And what about the precedent that's just happened recently with the Icelandic Prime Minister, the former Minister for Finance, the former Minister for Commerce, who are also at this stage facing offences and trials?
Yes, but no Irish ministers have committed any offences here. And I must say, I object to that suggestion. I mean, I certainly have acted in the public interest throughout this crisis, and I will continue to do so. And every step I have taken has been taken in the best interests of the Irish people, securing their jobs, securing our economy, and ensuring that we have a banking system that can be restored to the greatness it once had.
Finally, talking about culpability, the only people who seem to be left standing in all of this mess is the government you are part of. We have the worst economic crisis at the moment in the world. We have the worst banking bailout in the world. Would you accept you're probably the worst government we've ever had?
We don't have the worst government in the world, and we don't have the worst economy in the world, and we don't have the worst bank bailout in the world. They're extremely pejorative statements. First of all, the country that does have the worst economic fallout in the world is Iceland, which some of the Melder commentators here suggest we should copy. Iceland is still in economic contraction. Yes, we had a huge economic contraction last year. This year it has stabilised. There are very few economies in the world that have moved from a 10% decline in national wealth one year to a 0 decline the next year. That's how we turned the corner last year. And we'll continue by our own efforts to turn these corners, because as a people we have tremendous resilience. We have tremendous abilities. We have surmounted huge challenges in the past. And I have no doubt when you look at the 7.5% reduction we've already had to do in our national wealth as a result of budgetary policies. And we have survived that. And we know that if we want our children to have jobs, we have to face these challenges. We have to make the necessary adjustments and build up our economy again.
Final question. What would you say to the people tonight who are watching, who now know they're facing a bill of the guts of 50 billion, that the budget is going to be tougher than even the 3 billion cuts they were thinking of? They may ask themselves, why do they deserve this?
The banks will cost us about 1.5 billion a year. We're actually spending as a state about 19 billion a year more on ourselves than we're prepared to pay into it in our taxes. That's the real problem we have to focus on.
Minister, thank you very much for joining us.